noise!
Hello and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm, brought to you by funkandstuff.net. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I'm your host, Scott Dr. Jigs Goldfine, musicologist and author of Everything's on the One, the First Guide to Funk. If you don't have your copy, get on over to Amazon and pick one up. You'll be so glad you did. Whether you're watching the video version of this at funkandstuff.net or on YouTube, or listening to the audio-only podcast version from providers like iTunes and Spotify, as always, I thank you so much for your continued interest and support in the show. Speaking of which, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube. That's where Truth and Rhythm lives. All kinds of goodies. You'll get early premieres, and it's all free, so make sure you sign up. Tell a friend, tell family. Also, get your official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff gear at the funkandstuff.net store. Cool stuff like I'm wearing right here. Truth and Rhythm shirts. Show your support and love of the show and also the musicians and the music that they represent. Also want to give a shout out to the Funk Exhibition Center and Hall of Fame in Dayton, Ohio, of which I'm very proud to be an official funk ambassador. Go to thefunkcenter.org to learn more and keep the funk alive. And now, with all that, it's time to get on with the show. Enjoy. I'm pleased to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership bassist-composer Joe PLAs, an original member of one of the 1980s most underappreciated funk bands, Shock. Best known for their hit single, Let's Get Crackin', the group which also featured brothers Roger and Steve Souse, as well as former Pleasure and later Dazz Band guitarist Marlon McClain, who was also recently on the show, released 4 albums in the early 1980s, 1 in the late 1980s, and a final studio effort in 1994. Among their killer tracks were Let Your Body Do the Talkin', Electrophonic Phunk, Loosen Up, Nite Life, Crank It Up, San Juan, Waiting on Your Love, and Time War Our Lives. Plass also played on hit albums by saxman Kenny G, and in 2012 released his solo set After Hours, and he has a new single called Dreamin'. Back in 2007, Shock achieved some much-deserved notoriety by being inducted into the Oregon Music Hall of Fame. Joe, how are you? Welcome.
I'm good. How are you, Scott? Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Glad to have you. Where are you coming to us from today?
I'm in the middle of Oregon, Bend, Oregon. Yeah, I moved over here just to kind of get away from it all. You know, it's about 3 hours from my hometown, Portland, and life is a bit slower here, so I really enjoy that.
You know, I'm so glad that you're safe and hopefully keeping sane throughout this craziness. And, you know, how have you been kind of keeping your head straight through it all?
Just like a lot of people, just staying at home, staying safe, using common sense, going out once in a while. We do, because like I mentioned, I'm from Central Oregon. That's where I am now. There's a lot of outdoor activities that you can do, some camping things that we do, and just to air out once in a while.
Well, it'll be a few weeks before this airs, and hopefully we'll have better news by then when people are watching this. But so, you know, we're going to talk music, of course, and that's what helps keep us sane, as we were talking about, definitely. And the fact that you can play it so well must be an added boost, you know, to be able to do some of that while you're kind of sequestered, you know?
Yeah, it's, as a matter of fact, you know, you had mentioned I just released a new single, and that was one of those things that motivated me to put that out. It's a song I'd kind of had in my system half done for a long time, for like 3 years. And during the self-quarantining stuff, I just started digging into some music that I had done, and I finished that baby up so that, I had plenty of time to do it. I work at my home studio here, and with the help of a couple of friends and a long distance, recording, I got it out. So yeah, that's one of the great things. Blessed to be able to play music, is to be able to create and to have home studio, equipment. You're able to kind of express yourself still, and that kind of takes you away from everything, which is good medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, forgive the play on words, but I'm going to try to jolt your memory a little bit with some.
Let's see if that works.
of how little Joe first got into music and why gravitate towards the bass.
Oh wow! I mean, I don't know how much detail you want here, but little Joe started very young. Started taking piano when I was in the first grade. Always into music. It's kind of went from there. Piano lessons to guitar lessons, and then back to piano lessons again, all through grade school. And then at that time, I know you had mentioned Roger Sauce. Actually, Roger and I grew up within about a block and a half of each other. So we were childhood friends. I actually met him when I had chicken pox when I was 3 years old. So that's going back. And he had been playing music, and we started jamming together at a very young age. He, of course, spearheaded all this. I know Marlon, I'd watched that video of him, and, Roger had this incredible music energy. And as friends, man, I just wanted to get with him and do something. And we were creating all the time, mostly him. And I was pretty much learning from him a lot. And so, block parties in the neighborhood, 7th, 8th grade, that kind of thing. And one thing led to another. We played in a couple of bands during high school, and that's kind of then shock evolved out of that. It's a whole other kind of story, but that Roger was wanting to do, and then I got into that, and away we go.
Who are some of your biggest bass influences, would you say?
I started listening to Stanley Clarke when I was very young. Stanley Clarke, Alphonso Johnson, and then, of course, Jocko. And then later on, I jumped into a whole bunch of Marcus Miller stuff, and he's I'm just in awe of that dude and his feel and his tone and how he writes and arranges. Amazing. So those guys pretty much. And then when you get into the funk stuff, Larry Graham, Verdine White, those guys were a big part too.
Mm-hmm. And so would you say also the music by those guys, or were there some other types of music and musicians that also were favorites of yours?
Growing up, there were 6 kids in our family, so there was all different kinds of music going on. I'm second to youngest. I got influence from everybody. Led Zeppelin, you name it. I was into all those guys. Hendrix. Let me try to get some names out here. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, I'm listening to Tower of Power, Graham Central Station. And Earth, Wind and Fire was just huge. And so it was just a blend. And I also listened to a lot of the Temptations when I was very young. I had a brother who was into the Temptations, Smokey Robinson, the Supremes. All those people. I would literally sit with headphones on in the corner of our living room behind this one chair where we had the stereo. I would plug in the headphones and listen for hours to all that. And so, I took it all in. And, of course, kind of musically for me, what came out was primarily R&B music. is how I express myself. It wasn't anything I planned. It just kind of happened.
So what was the precursor to shock, basically?
The precursor to shock, how that evolved, how that started. It's all Roger, you know. This was his idea. He had formed a band, I think it was in high school, which right towards the end of high school, which was kind of where shock started. I was not in the very original first band. It was actually, the bass player was Danny Wilson, who we went to high school with, who was later Jeff Lorber's first bass player on some of his earlier stuff. But not too long after that, then I got in that band, and we would just rehearse and play around town. It kind of started to evolve. There were 2 or 3 different versions of the band early on. Different singers, different drummers, that kind of thing. But we would just gig around town, and then there was some interest with. We decided we had a manager in Portland who wanted to put us at a show, do a show at the Paramount Theater, which is now the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall. And so we did that. We rented that venue. I believe that's how it goes. Don't quote me on this. This was pretty much a Roger thing. I'm just trying to remember. But anyway, long story short, we did a show there that we put on. We had a good crowd, and in the audience was Marlon and David Lycan. Those two worked together. And so they showed interest in this. We also at that time had put out a 45, called, the song was called Shock. And then later on Nebula Circle Records, which was just a local record label, we did, our own LP. And that was recorded locally and put out by us. And that's what kind of stirred the interest, along with that concert and meeting with David Lycan and Marlon McClain. And they then, in turn, shopped us to Fantasy, which ended up getting us the deal.
What was the chemistry of that group like early on? And were you also playing covers as well as those originals? And
yeah, I believe we were playing some covers. Man, don't ask me to name what those were because I can't remember. But I think we did do some covers along with our original material. And just the vibe with the band, there was a lot of people. I mean, there were 10 of us. We were all young. We were all crazy. We all had a lot of energy. And Roger had the most energy of all of us. And we just kind of followed that lead. And it was a crazy ride, But we all managed, and we all got along. A lot of us are still friends today. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
What were like the aspirations at that point, when you were just doing that first indie label? I mean, did you think, hey, this could be a career for me, or maybe it's just a lark, or what? Totally.
I think all of us thought, we want to get a record deal, we want to make it big, this is going to be what our life is. I mean, we all, we're young, and anybody who is, wants to get into the music business, especially then, things were, and we were motivated to want to, be a success and compete with, the big leagues. So we all wanted to get a record deal and just going from there.
And did you feel like Roger had a sense of the type of, sound he wanted the group to have?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of sound was that? Because, on that first record, it's, the backing vocals are very prominent and interesting, and the horns are very prominent, and it's got a very polished, full sound right out of the gate, really.
Yeah, Roger has his own sound. He definitely has just his thing. A lot of energy, a lot of funk background, great feel for that. But we were inspired by, like Earth, Wind, and Fire for the vocal things. That was something that we kind of wanted to measure ourselves against. And then we had the horn section, so that was really cool too. And I think a lot of us all at that time were also influenced by Tower Power. And so it was just kind of a mesh of those influences along with Roger's vision and just the way he felt music. It had his stamp on it, you know, so I don't know, that's kind of it.
And he was a keyboardist. Did he play other instruments as well?
No, he was primarily a keyboardist. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he could play bass, you know, some and some guitar, and him and I used to, because we knew each other very well. I mean, he had very good ears, so he could pick up something and kind of pick it apart and figure it out on a guitar or a bass or something like that. But he was definitely a keyboard player.
I want to point out on that record, I mean, Shock was hot funk right there. You know, that track. How did you come? How did Roger or how did the band come up with the group name?
I don't honestly remember how he came up with that name. You know, that was just something Roger came up with. I think it just came in his head. He was idea guy. I mean, things would come up and he would just sell it right there. This is it. This is what it should be. This is a great name. I mean, that's kind of my take on it right now. But I honestly don't know how he came up with that name, you know, initially.
The Dog. Do you remember that one? That one's pretty funky.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. That's old school stuff right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Dance and Have Some Fun was a little more disco-y.
Right.
And Nite Life was kind of disco funk. And, you know, did you guys feel like you were trying to go very commercial or trying to be more independently creative, or, you know, a mix?
Yeah. You know, back then, I mean, I don't think we worried about it as much as we just wanted to be our own sound. I mean, there was that overall umbrella of wanting to sound kind of what was happening at the time in, you know, R&B. But at the same time, having that, you know, originality, our own thing, you know, the distinctive Shock sound. And so, yeah. That's...
So Marlon came. He was impressed. He saw you guys, and he got you a deal with Fantasy. How excited were you guys when that news came down?
That was very exciting. Yeah. Again, it's like the biggest thing in the world to a kid who's in their early 20s. You know, you invest a lot of time in it. You know, you dedicate it. I mean, I was living in the studio. Roger and I would be practically spending the night doing stuff and creating things. So to have that happen, you know, you're on top of the world. I mean, it's awesome. Feel like you got there, you know, you've been recognized.
And you redid several of the songs, or were they just pulled over directly, or you re-recorded some of those?
You mean on the 30th anniversary CD, Shock Aftershock?
Well, I know from the independent record, some of those tracks were carried over to the Fantasy.
Oh, right. Like, so Nite Life, that song was on the original album, but it's a completely different song. We redid it and just named it Nite Life. I can't remember off the top of my head what the heck else was on that, you know, Electrophonic Phunk record. Other than the Dog, you said. I just don't recall off the top of my head.
Well, I think you guys redid Shock as well, right? The track.
No, the song Shock, you know, if it was on the original Electrophonic Phunk CD or LP, the only other time I remember that song was on the 45, the single. But here we go. You know, I'm drawing a blank on this stuff. It's been so long. I can go upstairs and get the LPs and look at them. I'd have to take them off the wall.
All right, let's talk more in depth about that major label debut in 1981. And so, the world is coming out of the disco craze pretty much and moving, into the 80s with more of a polished R&B and funk sound. And when I listen to shock from that era, Joe, I think of you mentioned Earth, Wind and Fire. One group you didn't mention that I kind of think of a little bit is Heatwave. Just sort of that,
oh wow,
combination of song savviness and mix of a little disco and the funk and a little pop, and that's
true. I never thought about that. It's just everybody's got a different perspective on those things, what they hear. Of course, who didn't love Heatwave? They were great. But yeah, now that you mention that, that's true. There is some parallels there.
But I also hear things like influences like the Jacksons and Chic, and
oh yeah. I mean, all that stuff was of the time, so that there definitely are flavors of those guys in there too, for sure. It's weird when I go back and listen to that stuff. I just go, wow. It's so. It was amazing that the amount of production that you put into it. Basically, the way things were recorded then, and for a long time, before digital recording, it's just hours and hours of coming up with ideas on the spot. But then to execute them and get them on tape it's really intense, and but it's like a lot of things. That's the old school way of doing it, and to me, a lot of as much as I'm sucked into doing it the easy way now, compared to that, there's nothing better than that old school way of writing, collaborating. You're on the spot, on the moment with the people. It's real time stuff with the people, and I think that's where the best music has come from.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
yeah, just listening back to it all is just a trip to me, and how we created it. It's funny. I don't analyze the music itself as much anymore because I've heard the song so many times over the years. But I look back and I think about the process of how it was done, and like I just said, just the hours put into doing it and the people's personalities. There were people, you would spend a day in the studio doing something like cracking horn parts. And the horn section, they're writing most of the parts, with collaboration of ideas from Roger, but it was mostly the horn section that would come up with ideas, and then they would just kind of try it out, when we're tracking stuff, but manipulate as you go along, and just everything is molded right there, and that's just so awesome to think about how that happened,
Yeah. Well, and the result was so great, and it's enduring.
Yes.
We're here talking about it. So
that's right. It's amazing.
What did you feel like Marlon brought to the mix? How did things change, and what did he bring?
Well, we needed somebody from the outside who had experience to kind of help guide us through the process. Like I said, there were 10 people. You've got, writers and co-writers on different songs. It's great to have one guy with a good set of ears who has that background, who we all really looked up to at the time, and still do. But I mean, who could kind of ground us and keep us focused on the production end of it. And then on top of that, the guy's a great player, and he's got a great feel, and that in turn is another musician who brings something different, which blossoms. What blossoms out of that are other, us reacting to his playing, and so things change and become better, and so he really helped kind of keep us focused and to get from the starting point to the end of a in the studio, but just mostly all production stuff, and then on the business end too. So it That's what he brought to the table to me. I learned so much from that guy. He's a great professional guy, very level-headed, easy to listen to. I could just, for me personally, it was a really good learning experience. I grew a ton from that guy and his professionalism. So that's what he brought to the table, I think, and for me, definitely.
Yeah, well, it's a lot to bring. I was going to
Yeah.
say consummate pro, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Were you guys Pleasure fans?
Oh yeah. Pretty much anybody in Portland was a Pleasure fan. You were. It just happened. I started out. I mean, when they started, I had all their albums. I listened to them repeatedly. Nate Phillips, bass player. Like a lot of kids in Portland, bass players still, y'all wanted to copy what he was doing. So, it's just a testament how great they were. All great players, super tight band. Awesome. So, yeah.
I've heard that Fantasy was, very familial atmosphere and just a nice place to be signed to.
Yeah, well, I mean, for, Marlon and David Leck and those guys had been working with them already, and for us to get signed, it was kind of a smooth transition. My experience of going down there and recording was great, and it was pretty laid back, and just kind of took it all in. You're at that time when you're just getting into that whole thing, you're a little nervous about the whole thing, but it was a great experience. So yeah.
Did you think that Let's Get Crackin' would hit like it did? Did Roger feel like it would? I mean, what was the sentiment around that album? Did you think that would be the cut on the album?
Yeah, I think so. I can remember the moment, I think, when that hook was created, and it's one of those things when you're creating, the hook is the key. If it's something that just doesn't leave you and you have to repeat it over and over again, you're onto something good. And it was just a marriage of the groove and the crackin', let's get crackin' thing, and then Malcolm rapping over the top of it. It just fell together. It was one of those things that you just go, this thing's going, and it's pretty exciting. We were very amped about it. So yeah, I think we all kind of felt this was going to be something special.
And when it did sort of blow up, I'm sure you guys were as excited as you were about getting signed initially, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, we were. And, all the news was always positive about it. I wasn't so connected with the business end of it as Roger was with, Marlon and those guys. But it was a great ride, It was just really fun. And to see the charts every once in a while and where we were going on the R&B charts was just incredible.
Did the Tom Tom Club, Genius of Love, have a little influence? Were you guys listening to that around that time?
Wow.
The keyboard.
I know I listened to them, but it wasn't something I was going, I got to listen to them right now. I don't know, to be honest.
It's just the keyboard. The keyboard part brings to mind for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that one out. Again, that's been a long time, but I'll see what I'll check it out.
Yeah, you're talking to. I was a DJ for all those years, so I was always playing.
Oh wow,
tracks
you know all that stuff.
So
okay.
Do you remember the ballad on there, Each and Every Day?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt like a little confunction kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. That was there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great tune. I'm trying to remember who wrote that song. Was that Steve Sauce or?
It says Roger.
Roger wrote Each and Every Day? Okay.
Yeah, on here it says he did.
Okay, well, he did. Great song. I think Billy Bradford was the lead vocalist on that one. And, or was that Malcolm? Yeah. No, that was Malcolm. I'm pretty sure it was Malcolm.
And
But
then stand up,
right,
good funk pop right there. And
that's me singing that song.
really,
Yeah.
how'd you feel about that?
I was excited, man, Roger, and I got to sing. I got to sing lead vocals on this thing. It was crazy. So yeah, I felt good about it.
And did you write the lyrics on that one? You're
My
down as a
name is.
writer.
I'm down as a writer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Baseline, probably. I created that. I probably had something to do with lyrics on that.
Well, another influence we didn't mention, but I mean, I think it's pretty evident in a track like "Let's Get Crackin'" is P-Funk.
Yeah, oh, yeah. We always dug some P-Funk. Totally. And Roger was killer on those bass lines, man. He could do that stuff, and it was so much fun to listen to all that. And there's definitely that influence in there for sure.
So when that succeeded, how did it change your guys' lives in terms of were you who were you touring with at that point and that kind of thing?
There wasn't a lot of touring going on, to be honest with you. We really didn't do a lot of that. Gosh, I'm embarrassed to say, we just didn't do a lot of that. I think we went down to Oakland, I know, once, did a show down there. We went to Texas, did a few places there, but and we did a lot of stuff up in Seattle because we were close. The Northwest thing was kind of a back and forth doing that all the time deal. But other than that, there was not a lot of time or money invested in touring. I honestly could not tell you to this day why that was, but that would be for someone else to tell you. But yeah, we just didn't do a lot of that.
Do you have any idea of the sequence of events? I'm not sure I asked Marlon or not, but Pleasure, their last record came out in '80, I think, and then you guys were in '81. So did he part ways with them and then get with Shock, or do you remember how that happened?
I don't know. What happened between them. There are a million different stories, I'll put it to you that way. And I don't know which one is right or wrong, and I don't feel my place to even say anything about it.
Fair enough.
It's Marlon. I think he was with the McClain Music and Double T Productions, which was David Lycan, and that was kind of their thing with Pleasure early on, and then I think Marlon kind of was out of Pleasure, but still with David Lycan and Double T. And then they kind of were looking for artists, and that's when the interest came to Shock, and that went that way. But as far as how one thing led to another with Pleasure and Marlon and us, I don't know. I don't know how that all went down.
Fair enough, Joe.
Yeah.
Well, those shows that you were playing locally, though, did you notice that maybe people started knowing the songs better, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, we were very popular, and we would pack these clubs we played at. And again, I mentioned earlier, there are different versions of the band. For the first two albums, I think the '81, Let's Get Crackin' and all that, it was the 10-piece band, and we did shows around town. But whenever we played, there was definitely a huge buzz. I mean, and we did outdoor stuff at parks and things. There were big summertime concert deals, and we would pack those things. And we had a good buzz going in town. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of anything else that was. I kind of lost my train of thought there. What?
We were talking about the local shows and the reaction. Did you get to play? Did anyone come to town that you guys got to play with? Did you get to meet anybody that you were kind of excited about meeting?
Totally. So we played with. We opened up for James Brown at the Civic Auditorium. We opened up for Gladys Knight. and we opened up for, we did Tina Turner shows. We did a couple Tina Turner shows. That was right when she was coming out with What's Love Got to Do with It. I mean, it hadn't even come out yet. She had recorded it, but it wasn't out yet. And so yeah, those were amazing. That was we did stuff with we were the backup band for Lenny Williams, who was just out of the Tower of Power thing, you know, a few years before that. And we did a couple of shows being his band in Portland. Those events were like for Adidas or Avia shoes or Nike or something. And so that was cool. And trying to think if there's anybody else that we opened for, people that we met. But those were the big ones right there. Those were the biggies, you know, that at the time. That was just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you prefer being on stage or in studio?
I liked it both for separate reasons. I mean, on stage, there's nothing better than looking out, seeing the people and the energy when you do something that makes people react and makes them happy. And there's nothing better than that. That is, to have that gift of music, it makes you realize that you have a special gift when you can give it to other people. And you can spread that on to other people, and it makes them happy and forget about whatever else, because music, you know, it's just, it's so powerful that way. So live, that portion of it was great. I love that part of it. As far as in the studio, it's like a 50-50 thing. But in the studio, the creativity is just the best part for me. And it is still today, you know. I don't play live. I don't do any of that. But if I get an idea in my head, I'll hum it in my iPhone, and then later on I'll go up and I'll start tracking some ideas and figure some things out, and then I'll put it away in a vault. And I've probably got 100, 200 things like that, you know, that I do. So the creativity part of it is amazing to me. But yeah, performing, there's nothing you can't explain. You know, it's an energy that is just, it's a give and take thing. It's just, you're giving it, they're giving it back to you. Oh, they're taking in what you're doing, and it's great. I'm addicted to it for life, you know. Once you do it once, there's no going back, so.